Cornwall, the Isles of Scilly and the Channel Islands likely to stay pretty grey throughout. But elsewhere, brighter skies, sunny spells, higher temperatures as well. 11 degrees in Hull, 12 in Cardiff, 11 in Plymouth, much higher than they've been for much of this week. Feeling chilly still, though, in the northeast with that brisk wind. Even here, though, that wind continues to ease off through this evening, bar a few showers in the far north. It's dry for the vast majority overnight, and that combination of clear skies and lighter winds will make for a much colder night. Hints of blue on the chart. There will be pockets of frost around, certainly on Friday morning. Many rural areas down to 0, if not a little lower, and towns and cities not far behind. So a cold start to Friday, certainly colder than this morning. But tomorrow, again, generally dry and bright for much of the Midlands, eastern England, clouding over further west. A little bit of rain likely to trickle into Northern Ireland, western Scotland. Could be heavy across northern Scotland later on. And we may even see some rain and drizzle across Wales, northern England, chiefly over the hills. Temperatures perhaps not quite as high through Friday. We're starting off lower, remember, but generally compared to earlier in the week, temperatures are on the up and staying that way into the weekend. It's looking more changeable though, and there is the possibility of a wet and windy spell for some of us on Sunday. Bye for now.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Muroki on your TV and on your radio. We're here all the way through until midday. I've got an absolutely massive show for you today.
Yes, and make sure you get in touch with your views, as usual, GBviews at gbnews.uk. And we'll get to as many as possible throughout the show. But first, let's give you the latest news.
Good morning, it's just gone 10 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright here to keep you up to date in the GB News newsroom. Now, Prince Andrew's lawyers have accused Virginia Giuffre of wrongful conduct in their latest attempt to dismiss the civil sex abuse case against him. They've submitted 11 reasons why they believe the case should be thrown out. The Duke of York, who's consistently denied the allegation, also wants to appear before a jury to contest the claims. Well, the Sun's former royal correspondent, Charles Ray, says the outcome won't change how people view him.
Despite all this posturing by both sides, the plaintiff and the defence, you've got the situation where this case could end up being settled out of court, as 97% of civil actions are settled in America. So none of it is any good. You know, at the end of the day, whatever the result is, it's not going to look well for Prince Andrew, even if he's cleared of all these horrible allegations.
The highly anticipated report into alleged lockdown parties at Downing Street is said to have been delayed by some legal checks. The senior civil servant Sue Gray's findings were expected to be published as early as yesterday, but Westminster officials now believe it may not happen until next week. Well, the Labour Party is calling for the report to be published in full, following suggestions by cabinet ministers that sections may be redacted for security reasons. Leeds North East MP Fabian Hamilton told GB News Partygate means the Prime Minister should go.
My constituents, like every other MP's constituents, are sick to the back teeth of this whole Partygate nonsense. They want a resolution, and they want the man that has been at the back of this and the front of this to pack it in, frankly, because if he sets the rules for all of us, and then he breaks them willingly and knowingly, which he clearly has, and then lies to the House of Commons about it, which is against all the rules in the book, then he should resign straight away. I'm sorry.
The Defence Secretary says he's not optimistic a Russian invasion in Ukraine can be stopped. Moscow have amassed around 100,000 troops on the border, and they're strengthening its military presence, sending more vehicles to the Rostov region for drills. Well, the US has now formally rejected Russia's demand to ban Ukraine from NATO, repeating its commitment to an open-door membership policy. Former NATO Deputy Supreme Allied Commander General Sir Richard Sharif told GB News Putin is holding a gun to NATO's head.
Again and again, history tells us that the way to prevent wars is through deterrence and a removal of any hint of miscalculation by being determined, demonstrating a determination to be ready to defend ourselves. This is absolutely being ready to use force, of course, but it's being ready to use force in order to preserve peace. Peace is precious and we need to be very ready to defend it.
From Monday in England, there will be no limit on the number of visitors care home residents can have. The Department of Health also announced changes to COVID testing for workers. Well, weekly PCR tests will be replaced by pre-shift lateral flows for those working in care homes from the 16th of February. Plan B measures have now been scrapped in England, bringing a number of coronavirus rules to an end. Face masks are no longer required, but some retailers like Sainsbury's as well as transport operators are asking people to continue wearing them. The legal requirement for NHS COVID passes to enter venues like nightclubs has also been dropped. And today, on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, we remember the millions of people who were murdered in the Holocaust under Nazi persecution. The official ceremony at the Bundestag in Germany is underway. The German Chancellor, President and Israel's President are amongst those who laid a wreath at the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe.
It may be disturbing for viewers to think about the fact that 6 million individuals, they were taken away from their homes, put in ghettos, some sent into the forests and shot and thrown into a ditch, some deported to concentration camps and death camps, straight to the gas chamber. It is unimaginable. It's very difficult for us to get our heads around.
Job seekers will soon have just 1 month on universal credit before they're forced to look for jobs outside their chosen field. It's part of government plans to get an extra 500,000 people employed by the end of June. The average property rental price has increased at the fastest rate on record. A Rightmove survey found it's now £1,068 per month outside of London and £2,142 in the capital. You're up to date here on GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now back to the point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys on your TV and radio this morning until midday. Here's what we've got for you.
Yes, well, the fight continues for Boris Johnson's premiership as more Tory MPs reportedly prepare to submit letters of no confidence in anticipation of Sue Gray's report. into the Downing Street rule-breaking during lockdown. We'll get the latest from our political editor, who is live at Downing Street for us this morning.
Yes, and Prince Andrew has denied being a close friend of convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell, and now says he wants to go before a jury to contest the sexual assault claims brought against him by Virginia Giuffre. We'll be joined by royal biographer Angela Levin to discuss what all this means for the Duke.
Yes, indeed. Is he brave? Is he stupid? We'll have to wait and see. And we will be joined by Conservative peer Lord Finkelstein, whose mother was a Holocaust survivor, to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day today.
That's what we've got coming up for you, and much more as well. And we want to hear your views, as usual, so get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. We'll get to as many as we can, as usual, but first, Patrick gives his views on remembering the Holocaust.
Today is an important day. We stop and remember arguably the single greatest evil in human history, the Holocaust. The attempted extermination of an entire religious group, the Jews, by the Nazis, is a stain on mankind that no amount of scrubbing can ever wash clean. Around 6 million Jewish men, women and children were killed in the most repugnant of ways, and 2/3 of Europe's Jewish population was wiped out. I find it absolutely terrifying how many people just went along with it. How many supposedly ordinary people were capable of so much hatred? How many were complicit in genocide? This is exactly why we need to keep discussing the Holocaust, to have a day where we devote our minds to the memory of those who perished, but also to think of the pure evil of it all. If we don't remember, then, obviously, we forget, and it makes it more likely that something like the Holocaust could happen again. It's a horrifically morbid insight into the human brain, isn't it? Into human nature. Of course, at the root of it all lies Adolf Hitler. And yes, there was propaganda, there was brainwashing and the ability to cover up, perhaps, the true extent of the genocide from many members of the public. But there were an astonishing amount of people who knew that this was taking place and who went along with it. Not just the slaughter, but the ghettoisation of Jews, rounding them up, smashing their businesses, making them wear yellow stars, branding them. And that's the thing. It didn't start out with mass murder, did it? It built up to it. And that is why it's so important to root out evil so early on to stop its progression. But the persecution of the Jewish people didn't stop when the concentration camps closed. There is still anti-Semitism taking place today. The recent attack on a bus full of Jewish children on Oxford Street in London is a prime example. Children were subjected to Nazi salutes and even spat at. There were record levels of anti-Semitism reported in the UK last year, and just yesterday, 2 elderly Orthodox Jewish bakers were attacked in Stamford Hill. If we go a bit further back, there was, of course, the Six-Day War, wasn't there? A collection of Arab countries co-conspired to wipe Israel off the face of the map. Goodness only knows what would have happened to the Jewish population if they'd succeeded in that. But despite the Holocaust showing the very worst of humankind, some elements of it show the very best as well. The will to survive at all costs, the inner strength of people who are desperate to cling to life. All the non-Jewish people who helped hide entire families, the compassion, empathy and support shown there. The sacrifices they made. All the Allied troops who laid down their lives to defeat arguably the greatest ever evil. People making the ultimate sacrifice so others could live. From the barren, scorched earth of Auschwitz, ultimately new life flourished. The rebirth of a community determined to come back from the brink. Yes, I'm sure with hate in their hearts, but also crucially, hope. Hope for a better world, hope for a brighter future, hope that history never repeats itself. We must never forget what happened. Yeah, I mean, it's the enormity of it all for me. It's just, it's the absolute enormity. And look, I don't, spend all day, every day thinking about it. Of course not. But, on a day like this, Holocaust Memorial Day, it's almost too much to take in, really.
Yeah, it is. And I remember the Holocaust is the only historical event you legally have to teach in history on the national curriculum. And so every child in this country will, at some point in their history lessons, learn about the Holocaust. But I think for me, it didn't really hit until in my college years. They took us to Auschwitz.
Oh, you've been? I've not been.
Yes, you can't put it into words how harrowing it is to be there. And for me, the thing that got me most, I think, what I found most poignant was part of it has been made into a museum. And there's this room where they have sort of exhibitions, and there's this room where they have all the hair that was shaved off. Well, not all of it, obviously, but they have a massive collection of the hair that was shaved off, and you can even see sort of a little girl's pigtail with the ribbon still in it. I just found that incredibly overwhelming. So I would, I don't know if recommend is the right word, but I think to appreciate how absolutely horrific it was going to Auschwitz and seeing it in person really does make it hit home.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, you don't want to say, like, oh, I would like to go. I mean, no one likes to go, do they? But I think it's important to do it. And so, I think it's probably something that we should all maybe do at some point, because it is that risk, isn't it, of if you do forget, it's more likely to happen again. Also, there's a couple of very, very good points on this as well, which is, you know, this is exactly why we don't need to do things like cancel Churchill. Right, you know, we would be living in a Nazi-occupied German colony if it wasn't for this guy, and there wouldn't be a Jewish population, would there, realistically?
Yeah. Well, we'll be speaking to Lord Finkelstein, as we mentioned, a bit later. You won't want to miss that. His mother was a Holocaust survivor, so we'll get some thoughts from him on this Holocaust Memorial Day.
Indeed. Right, well, look, just moving away from that for now, more backbench Conservative MPs are reportedly planning to submit letters of no confidence in Boris Johnson once Sue Gray's Partygate report is published.
Yes, this comes as leaked emails seem to suggest that the Prime Minister did intervene to rescue animals from Afghanistan, a claim he had previously denied. Well, for more on this, let's cross to Downing Street to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Good morning, Darren. Tell us more about these fresh allegations of lying from the Prime Minister.
Well, in some ways, actually, these date back to last summer, to the fall of Kabul. You may have remembered the sheer chaos at Kabul airport when British and American troops were pulling out of Afghanistan, or the very few that remained there. And at the time, Pen Farthing was campaigning, essentially, that he could evacuate some dogs and cats, stray dogs and cats in Afghanistan, that he wanted to kind of get out of Kabul. And at that stage, there was an attempt on the media to try and convince Britain that it should happen. In the end, it did. But the question is, how was it allowed? Who authorised it? And there have been questions about whether the Prime Minister had a role in that, Mercy, to lobby essentially on behalf of him to try and get a plane that he, of course, himself had managed to get hold of to get those animals out. There were suggestions, and have been since, that may well have been at the expense of human beings. However, there's no evidence for that. But what did appear yesterday was a letter which seems to contradict the Prime Minister's denial that he did intervene. He called it at the time utter nonsense. Well, a letter that got leaked to the Foreign Affairs Committee seems to say that officials inside the Foreign Office had thought that the Prime Minister had acted and had authorised this flight to take place. Now, it must be said, Downing Street denied that, the Defence Secretary denies it, Pen Farthing denies it, but officials clearly in the Foreign Office thought it was the case. And you're right, there are further questions about whether the Prime Minister may have misled everyone and what role he precisely played in all of this.
Yeah, I mean, one of my first ever monologues, I think, on GB News was about this issue, and I made this point, look, it's absolutely ludicrous that we're wasting time and resources, etc., getting animals out and not people. And I absolutely copped it from a lot of people watching the show who really genuinely were glad that the animals got out, and they thought that maybe it was the right thing to do. But it's more a question of whether or not the Prime Minister has lied, isn't it? It's not necessarily about the animals over people debate, is it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's clearly a debate about that. You know, I think there's about 65 of Pen Farthing's employees in Afghanistan and their families who were left behind. And clearly there were people who have struggled to get out of Afghanistan. So I don't think that debate, in essence, has completely gone away. But yeah, this is much more specifically about what was the involvement of the Prime Minister. And really interestingly, his PPS had written a letter essentially saying that, or calling for this to happen, this evacuation flight. Now, again, she said she did it simply as a constituency MP, even though Pen Farthing is not a constituent of hers. There were, again, many questioning why would the PPS to the Prime Minister be doing this if the Prime Minister was not somehow involved. But this is only part of, clearly, a wider story about honesty involving the Prime Minister. It's kind of the latest headache, if you want, or unwanted news at a time when everyone here in Westminster is waiting with bated breath for the Sue Gray report. We've been waiting for days, haven't we? We thought it was going to be yesterday. There is still a possibility it could be today, though it could now be next week. The Prime Minister left Downing Street this morning, which would let you think that we're not expecting it anytime imminently. We know the report itself has been concluded, Patrick. The problem is it looks like lawyers and trade unionists are going through it to ensure that it doesn't, A, cut across the Metropolitan Police investigation, which is separate to Sue Gray's report into the parties in Downing Street, and also that if there are people to be named in this report, obviously the HR department at Downing Street and the Cabinet Office of Whitehall will want to ensure that they in somehow either know in advance or are somewhat protected, even if they could face consequences. So the waiting game continues for us in the media, for you at home, but more importantly probably for Conservative MPs who at some stage will need to make up their mind about whether they do put those letters in to Sir Graham Brady.
Darren, thank you for that. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor. Well, we're also joined this morning by Mark Littlewood, who's the Director General of Libertarian and Free Market think tank, the Institute of Economic Affairs. Mark, thank you for your time this morning. Do you think this saga is actually an unhelpful distraction, or actually do we need to get this issue resolved so that we can move on to important questions, such as the question of the economy?
Both, to be honest. It's both an unhelpful distraction, but one that we have to deal with so we can move on. And in fact, yesterday I was talking to a Conservative MP who was sort of saying, oh, this is all trivial. There's many more important things in the world. I mean, Patrick, you know, highlighting Holocaust Memorial Day at the start of the show. Why are we arguing about cake? But and parties and you know, animals and the rest of it. But the truth is that when you get into an unfolding crisis like this, Number 10 Downing Street and the Prime Minister and the government is paralysed, basically. It doesn't have the bandwidth to deal with anything else. It will be all hands on deck to be dealing with a report about what happened at a garden party. So until you can clear the decks of that, one way or another, put it behind you or heads need to roll, it's very difficult for the normal business of government to continue. And although for some people it looks a bit trivial, who had a glass of wine when, and were they socially distanced in the back garden, did they think that was a work event? I think it matters a lot, because what's at stake here is the rule of law and whether those who bring in the laws and enforce the laws believe in them and abide by them. And crucially, as Darren was just saying from Downing Street, whether they're then honest if any mishaps have happened. And although we don't know all the details and the police and Sue Gray are looking into all of the facts, I think there are some pretty big questions for the Prime Minister and others to answer here.
Well, there are, certainly. I think as well, you know, like you just alluded to there are increasing numbers, in my opinion anyway, of the British public, just from my anecdotal evidence, who are just desperate for us to move on from this now and have had enough, because there are some of the big issues, like you've just kind of alluded to there. There's the cost of living crisis, there's the energy crisis, etc. And that is, these things aren't getting dealt with, are they, as long as we are, as you put it, you know, talking about cake. But realistically, I think this report is going to come out on Monday. Do you anticipate that the letters will flood in? Do you think that there will be a vote of no confidence? Because if he wins that, he's good for a year, I think, isn't he?
Yeah, I genuinely don't know, Patrick. And, you know, it's the biggest guessing game in Westminster. If you want to pull a good practical joke on the Conservative Party, walk up to Sir Graham Brady and give him a fistful of letters and say, I think these might be for you, even if they're not from Conservative MPs. Everybody's guessing how many letters Sir Graham Brady has. He's a very discreet man, and we just don't know. I've got no idea whether it's 10 or just about to cross the threshold. All we know for sure is it's under 54, because that would trigger the vote of confidence as soon as he gets the 54th letter. Sir Graham Brady of the Backbench 1922 committee will announce it. But look, I wonder whether that's the only lens to look at this down, Patrick. I mean, you'll remember looking back at Theresa May's ultimate downfall. She had a vote of confidence. She prevailed in it quite comfortably. But nevertheless, the clock was still ticking, and it was almost the old-fashioned men in grey suits who got rid of her. It became simply untenable for her to continue. So I think that whilst Westminster watchers will be keeping a very close eye on which Tory MPs say they put in their letters and who hasn't and who might and whether they will when the Gray report comes out, that's not the only way that things could go wrong for the Prime Minister. He not only needs to thwart that vote of confidence happening or prevail in it if it does, but he might just find that events overwhelm him as they did his predecessor, and his position becomes untenable.
Is there much public appetite, though, do you think, for what presumably would happen next? Because there would be a Conservative leadership election. This is if Boris goes, obviously. Be a Conservative leadership election. One would imagine maybe a general election within the next 18 months, depending on the political landscape. If the Tories win that, then possibly Keir Starmer might have to go, so we might end up being bogged down in a Labour leadership election. Meanwhile, Rome burns, doesn't it?
Well, that's right. And it is quite extraordinary, really, if you think about it, that just, barely, 2 years and a month on from Boris Johnson winning a spectacular landslide victory in a general election, that there's any question of the security of his position. But it's been a weird couple of years, hasn't it? Look, were he to go, there's a number of ways it could be done, I guess, in order to make sure that the business of government continues. I guess he could announce he was going to go on, say, the 1st of July, and the Conservatives could elect a leader in the meantime. You could have perhaps a temporary prime minister. Some have suggested Dominic Raab, the deputy prime minister, if he were not a candidate, could be the deputy, could step up to the plate for a few weeks. So look, I'm not sure a change of leadership would be any more chaotic in the corridors of power than we've witnessed in recent weeks or indeed months, Patrick. So whether we have the appetite for that, I think, Conservative MPs will have to decide. It would be lovely, wouldn't it, in 2022 for some sort of normality to return. The last few years have just been so chaotic. But unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any sight of that soon. Perhaps the Prime Minister will be largely exonerated in these reports, in which case we can definitely all move on.
That'd be a turn-up.
Then it's a nagging, ongoing issue. And, I think that oftentimes you're best to resolve these things quickly. And unfortunately, Number 10 Downing Street didn't seek to resolve this quickly at the time. So if you want my prediction, Patrick, many more weeks and months of political chaos to follow.
All right,
Fun
Mark.
stuff, eh? Got a lot to look forward to. Mark, thank you for joining us. Mark Littlewood there, giving his insight, Director General of free market think tank, the Institute of Economic Affairs.
Can you imagine if this report just totally exonerates Boris? He comes in and he's just like, Boris actually broke the parties up. He sent them all home. I mean, that would be a real turn-up. Anyway, right, moving away. Prince Andrew has requested a trial by jury for his sex assault case, which is currently a civil case. But will he get one? We're looking to more after the weather.
Good morning. If you've been starved of sunshine this week, well, most places will see at least some blue sky today. A brisk wind blowing this morning, but that should steadily ease, and it's feeling milder out there, certainly across the south, even though we actually had a cold front drifting its way southwards through the course of the night. The isobars have been very close together across northern Scotland. It's been very, very windy across Orkney and northern parts of the mainland. Still very blustery across the Northern Isles and the far north through this morning, but those winds easing down, bringing a few showers here and there as well, some snow on the hills. Damp start for South Wales and that patchy rain trickling into Devon and Cornwall this morning before tending to ease off, although Cornwall, the Isles of Scilly and the Channel Islands likely to stay pretty grey throughout. But elsewhere, brighter skies, sunny spells, higher temperatures as well. 11 degrees in Hull, 12 in Cardiff, 11 in Plymouth. Much higher than they've been for much of this week. Feeling chilly still, though, in the northeast with that brisk wind. Even here, though, that wind continues to ease off through this evening, bar a few showers in the far north. It's dry for the vast majority overnight, and that combination of clear skies and lighter winds will make for a much colder night. Hints of blue on the chart. There will be pockets of frost around, certainly on Friday morning. Many rural areas down to 0, if not a little lower, and towns and cities not far behind. So a cold start to Friday, certainly colder than this morning. But tomorrow, again, generally dry and bright for much of the Midlands, eastern England. Clouding over further west. A little bit of rain likely to trickle into Northern Ireland, western Scotland. Could be heavy across northern Scotland later on. And we may even see some rain and drizzle across Wales, northern England, chiefly over the hills. Temperatures perhaps not quite as high through Friday. We're starting off lower, remember, but generally compared to earlier in the week, temperatures are on the up and staying that way into the weekend. It's looking more changeable though, and there is the possibility of a wet and windy spell for some of us on Sunday. Bye for now.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:27 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys on GB News live on your TV and radio this morning.
Yes, indeed. Well, in a major new development in the case of Prince Andrew, the Duke has asked for a jury trial to contest the civil sexual assault case brought against him by Virginia Giuffre. Now, the Duke of York is accused of forcing her to have sex more than 2 decades ago at the London home of now convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah, he has consistently and strongly denied all the allegations against him and now denies being a close friend of hers. Well, joining us now is Angela Levin, a royal biographer and reporter. Just explain to us, Angela, why you think Prince Andrew wants a jury trial and what does this mean? What's the alternative to that?
Well, I think it's very complicated, really. It could be lots of things. It could be a ploy to give Virginia what her lawyers claim she wants, which is not to do with the money, but she wants her day in court. But whether she would get very scared by what he said he doesn't know anything about and the accusations about her, for example, having dirty hands, which means that she was responsible for getting lots of underage girls and passing them on to Mr. Epstein. It could be that he wants to not to give her any money and to win the court case. It's very difficult to know at this stage what the lawyers are up to, but it seems really horrific that it's going to drag on right to the end of the year. They think there'll be a case between September and December. However, it's also possible that they will make, they will have an agreement. Over 90% of civil cases in America are agreed on just before they go to court. And sometimes it's at the door itself. So he wouldn't have to necessarily speak. But the cloud that hangs over him. It hangs over the Queen, poor woman who's not terribly well and 95. It hangs over the Jubilee in the summer. You'll always get a case on the front pages, if it's sort of crude and vulgar, than you will about Her Majesty going to Epsom and seeing the horses, which she loves so much. You know, it's just that.
Yeah, will she be begging him? Will she be begging him to just settle, do you think?
Well, the Queen isn't a micromanager. She likes to leave children to get on with it. However, rarely, as we've seen, she does come up with a very strong view, like saying that they weren't going to pay for lawyers. That's another question. Who's going to pay for them now? And Andrew has to face it as an ordinary citizen. I don't know whether she's still speaking to him. I doubt if she has stopped speaking to him, because she does love him. There's a difference between being a monarch, knowing what's right, and actually loving your child. It's very mixed and complicated. I don't think she would beg, especially not if it is a ploy and it's a way that the lawyers think that they can get him off the hooks.
It's obviously the Queen's Platinum Jubilee year this year, and other things are happening in terms of the royals. Prince Harry's set to publish that tell-all book, isn't he? This time next year, what do you think we will be remembering in relation to the royal family? Will it just be that big celebration, or actually could it be something much more damning in relation to Prince Harry and the Duke?
I feel it could be something much more damaging, because I think we enjoy something that's happy and wonderful, but that enjoyment doesn't last so long. But something that's really nasty, which you find intolerable and unforgivable, will keep regurgitate. I'm not trying to compare this to the Holocaust, but you said just before that, it comes back to you in your mind. And I think that nasty, unpleasant things do come back. It's not the same at all, but you do remember those things and they haunt you. They can do. We don't know what will happen with the monarchy. I hope the Queen feels better and survives, because she's had a wonderful time and stimulation and lots of people which she loves. But we don't know what's going to happen to anybody, do we, really?
No, Angela, look, thank you very, very much. Thank you for giving us your insights, really, into that story. Of course, the latest development there, that Prince Andrew has requested a jury trial in the case, of course, brought to him by Virginia Giuffre. Angela Levy there, of course, royal expert. We have got a couple of you, well, we've got a lot of views coming in. A lot of people getting in touch about the animals issue. Boris Johnson, supposedly anyway, I don't know, allegedly, whatever you want to say, may have signed off or been a part of the decision anyway to devote some resources at least towards bringing animals and not people back. A lot of people are saying, look, hang on a second, why are we still talking about pen farthing? This was ages ago, and actually he did quite a good thing. But, it's in a range of views on it. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
We'll get to more of those shortly, but after the break, our home and security editor Mark White talks us through the latest from Ukraine. But before that, a look at this morning's news.
It's 10:33. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date in the GB News newsroom. Prince Andrew's lawyers have accused Virginia Giuffre of wrongful conduct in their latest attempt to dismiss the civil sex abuse case against him. They've submitted 11 reasons why they believe the case should be thrown out. The Duke of York, who's consistently denied the allegations, also wants to appear before a jury to contest the claims. The highly anticipated report into alleged lockdown parties at Downing Street is said to have been delayed by some final legal checks. The senior civil servant Sue Gray's findings were expected to be published as early as yesterday, but Westminster officials now believe it may not happen until next week. The Defence Secretary says he's not optimistic a Russian invasion in Ukraine can be stopped. Well, Moscow have amassed around 100,000 troops on the border with Ukraine, and they've been strengthening their military presence, sending more vehicles to the Rostov region for drills. The US has formally rejected Russia's demand to ban Ukraine from NATO. From Monday, there'll be no limit on the number of visitors to care homes in England. The Department of Health also announced changes to COVID testing for workers in care homes. Weekly PCR tests will be replaced by pre-shift lateral flows from the 16th of February. Plan B measures have been scrapped in England, bringing a number of coronavirus rules to an end. Face masks are no longer required, but some retailers like Sainsbury's and some transport operators are asking people to continue to wear them. The legal requirement as well for NHS COVID passes to enter venues such as nightclubs has now been dropped. Rising energy and food prices contributed to an estimated 2.5 million UK households missing bill payments this month. A survey by consumer group Which found that people struggle to pay at least one mortgage, rent loan or credit card account. You are up to date now here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. I'll keep you up to date across the morning. A short break now and then we'll be back to the point.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Yes, good morning, everybody. It's 10:37. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Muroki as well here on GB News, and we're live on your TV and your radio.
Yes, well, every year on the 27th of January, we commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day, which is a day to remember, honour and share the stories of the lives of the millions of Jews brutally murdered by the Nazi regime. An estimated total of 6 million men, women and children were kidnapped, tortured and murdered between 1941 and 1945.
Yes, well, Lord Finkelstein is a journalist and a Conservative peer as well. His grandfather founded the Wiener Holocaust Library, the world's oldest institution devoted to the study of the Holocaust. And his mother was indeed a Holocaust survivor as well. Really grateful for your time this morning. Thank you very, very much. Just begin by telling us what Holocaust Memorial Day really means to you.
Well, this week, actually, as well as being Holocaust Memorial Day, is the day that of the week of the anniversary of my grandmother's death. She was on an exchange that Himmler had arranged out of Belsen concentration camp. She saw her girls, my mother and her two sisters, to freedom. They came across the border to Switzerland, and on the night that she came across the border, she died of starvation and disease, and that was actually in this week. So when my family commemorates Holocaust Memorial Day, we always think particularly of Greta, my mother's mother. This was the time of year also that my mother, who's no longer alive either, was particularly busy speaking to schools, making sure the next generation learned about the Holocaust.
And of course, one of the messages to come out of Holocaust Memorial is that never again message. Do you think, as time has gone on, the impact of that never again message has, stayed with society, or do you think it's actually waned?
I do think that more than 10 years ago, I'm more worried now about the preservation of democratic norms and the rule of law throughout the Western world. And this particular thing arose with me when Donald Trump got elected president of the United States, but you can see it throughout the world with Putin and with Erdogan in Turkey, right through with Viktor Orban in Hungary, with the Law and Justice Party in Poland, whereas maybe 10 or 20 years ago there'd been a kind of rise in liberal democratic norms all over the world. Now I think that's more vulnerable. So I think it's particularly important to remind ourselves what happens when those norms get eroded.
Well, indeed, and it is, obviously, of course, it's that kind of constant concern, isn't it, that it could, in some way, shape or form, happen again. We're seeing a rise, anyway, in recorded cases, anyway, of anti-Semitism right here, though. The reason there was one last night, was attacked last night, is believed to be potentially a hate crime. I mean, it certainly looks that way. I've seen some of the video footage of it. 2 Orthodox Jewish men in Stamford Hill attacked by someone as he walked past. Are you concerned that actually there is an increase in anti-Semitism right here?
Yeah, I absolutely am. And one of the things that is interesting is that my grandfather, my mother's father, who founded the Wiener Holocaust Library. He wasn't a Zionist. He believed that Jews could remain in Germany, and they had this kind of row. The Zionists said, if we don't get out of Germany, they're going to kill us all. And my grandfather said, if you go to Palestine, the Palestinians won't accept you there. And the great tragedy of Jews is they both turned out to be right. Before the war, there were all these signs over Europe, Jews go to Palestine, and now there are signs all over the walls in Europe, Jews get out of Palestine. And I think there are a lot of Jews who do worry about this again. Look, Jews are they're only one grouping in society. The issue of racial tolerance and understanding the experience of others has got to extend to others. So we should use Holocaust Memorial Day also to remember lots of other people who have been oppressed. We should use it to reflect to ourselves the things that we could do better, and that goes for Jews as well as anybody else. So I don't, though it's a day when I'm grateful that people remember what my mother went through. I think it's also a day when I try hard to remember what other people have gone through, to try to make myself a sort of better person, and to be more protective of democratic norms and racial equality.
And just yesterday, I think it was, we were speaking about the rapper Wiley, who was pictured with Marcus Rashford, and another footballer, Marcus Rashford. He is, of course, a raging anti-Semite, is how I would describe him. He said some horrific things. Marcus Rashford has apologised about being pictured with him. But I just wondered whether you think young people in particular, they're educated enough about the Holocaust, because we do legally have to teach the Holocaust in this country on the national curriculum. But I just wonder if young people truly do understand how horrific of an event it was.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand. Look, a lot of people don't understand a lot of things in public affairs. This is it's particularly important. It's one of the reasons why I've been a strong supporter of the Holocaust Memorial, which not all Jews are supportive of where the Holocaust Memorial is being put. Some people worry that it'll attract anti-Semitism itself. But my view is this thing can be remembered on behalf of all people who want to remember not to oppress other people. I think Marcus Rashford, for example, is a very well-intentioned person. I think if he'd known about what Wiley had said, he wouldn't have posed for the picture, but he simply was ignorant of it. So, and when he was told about it, he understood a bit better. So the crucial thing is education. Nadim Zahawi put it very well today. He said education is the vaccination against things like the Holocaust happening again. And that's very much how I feel. I think that if we can teach people about the experiences of people like my mother and people like my grandmother, we can prevent this happening again to anybody, including Jews.
And I think it's just important, this is a Memorial Day, right? And so I would quite like, if you're able to anyway, maybe just talk to us a bit about your mother, some of your memories of her and what she felt about the whole thing,
So my mother always used to say that she wanted to be more than just a survivor. She wanted to live. She did live, actually. And I think the most important thing to understand is in this wonderful country of ours, which is the reason why I'm so keen to protect its traditions and its character. In this wonderful country of ours, my mother lived a long and happy life after she came here. My mother was born in Berlin in 1933, and my grandfather had been one of the sort of activists against the Nazis, so they had to move. They had to get out of Germany. They went to Holland, and unfortunately that wasn't far enough. They thought Holland would be neutral. And that's why my mother was arrested and eventually ended up in Westerbork and then in Bergen-Belsen, which is why her mother starved to death. Lots of people at the end in Belsen starved to death, and that's where Anne Frank, who my mother had actually known, she also did starve to death in Bergen-Belsen. And eventually she came to this country and met my father, who'd been a survivor of Stalin's deportation of the Poles to Siberia, his attempt actually to wipe out the Polish people. And the two of them always believed very strongly in the sort of British values and the rule of law. And I've taken up that mantle from them, I think.
Well, Daniel Finkelstein, thank you so much for joining us and sharing that with us this morning. We really value your time. Conservative peer and journalist, of course. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Well, obviously, it's an important day to remember, isn't it? And it's an important thing to think, to actually speak to people who have got, you know, direct experience. Obviously, his mother was a Holocaust survivor there. But anyway, as we've been discussing throughout the week, Boris Johnson has been thrust into two investigations in relation to potential COVID rule-breaking in Downing Street during lockdown. I mean, I'm sure we're all aware of that, and indeed most of you are probably sick of it. But anyway, one is by senior civil servant Sue Gray, whose final report into the parties we still await, possibly on Monday, we're thinking. And the second by the Metropolitan Police. So that's where Boris is up to at the moment.
Yes, well, now there's fresh claims that he lied about intervening in rescuing animals from Afghanistan. So we can be joined by Tom Harwood, our political correspondent, right now to discuss that. So just tell us a bit more about these fresh allegations and their significance as well.
Well, there's a bit of confusion over what this all means. The Foreign Affairs Select Committee yesterday, just before Prime Minister's questions, it didn't get that much coverage at the time because, of course, we're going through an extraordinary moment of convulsing of British politics. But an email, a leaked email was published by the Foreign Affairs Select Committee from someone in the Foreign Office saying that the Prime Minister was personally giving his approval to an evacuation flight of cats and dogs from Kabul airports. Now, of course, the Prime Minister, in an interview over the summer around the time, absolutely flatly denied that he had personally intervened. Now, the reason why this is a little bit murky is, of course, this isn't a smoking gun. This isn't evidence that the Prime Minister personally intervened. What it is evidence that someone in the Foreign Office thought that the Prime Minister had intervened. So if we're going to take a generous interpretation of the Prime Minister's view here, it could be that there were mixed wires, that someone thought they were acting on the behalf of the Prime Minister, or it could be that the Prime Minister is being less than truthful and did personally intervene.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we'll have to wait and see, really. But it is starting to look, well, it's not starting to look, it looks now like there's a massive witch hunt going on with Boris Johnson. Things are being leaked left, right and centre. Do you not think? I mean, you know, people are, whether it's pictures of him, you know, in his back garden or whatever. Apparently the Sue Gray's report obviously has got pictures of him in front of bottles of wine and things like that. And then now, you know, all these emails are coming out. It's looking a little bit like a witch hunt, isn't it?
I suppose when you have a moment of maximum weakness for an individual, all of the various enemies in various camps think, well, now's the moment to pounce, now's the moment to strike. I think that's the reason why for 2 years we didn't hear about this evidence of parties. We didn't hear about these sort of stories until a slight dip in the polls, the convulsing over the Owen Paterson affair, and then suddenly these party stories start to come out of the woodwork. I'm not sure it's necessarily a organised conspiracy, but more just the likelihood that various people who, for various reasons, dislike this Prime Minister feel like now is the time to leak what they were holding.
Can I not just say as well, do you not think Barry Gardner's got off a bit lightly here? I mean, that was a massive story about that Chinese spy. We're not talking about that at all, are we?
That certainly was. There was a Chinese spy whose son was employed by a senior member of Parliament who seemed to be mixing with the great and the good of British politics for well over a decade at the core of the British establishment. This was a story that we have quickly
that's a massive story.
Moved away from. But I think this is the problem, and this is why so many politicians, particularly on the Conservative side, are so frustrated. There are big events going on in the world. Potential war in Europe, the highest inflation in 30 years. Foreign actors, hostile foreign actors mixing in the core of our politics. And what are we talking about so often? Wine and cheese. But whose fault is that? That's the big question. Is it the fault of Boris Johnson for getting in those parties, that we're being a big distraction? Or is it the fault of Tory MPs for getting into too much of a fuss about it? I mean, that's a question, because, of course, when we look at every opinion poll about where the country sits, of course, there is a solid core group of people who think Boris Johnson can do no wrong. There is, of course, the Tory party still polling around 30-35%. But the rest of the public, very, very angry.
Well, tell us when we can finally stop talking about this, because, I mean, the conclusion a lot of people were waiting for in some respects was that Sue Gray report. When will that be published? And do you think that's when those 54 letters will go into the the chair of the backbench committee to try and force that leadership election?
You know, it's so hard to know, because also there are big questions now over whether the report will be published or can be published in full. There are arguments between lawyers and civil servants within the structures of government who say that when there's an active Metropolitan Police investigation, as was opened a couple of days ago, what the Metropolitan Police are exploring may not be able to be published in full. So there's a question about how much will be redacted about this report, how much will be able to go forward, and this seems to be the delay. We know that as of yesterday, Sue Gray has completed her report. She has finished writing it. What is happening now is that various lawyers and civil service members are peering over every jot and tittle of that report before it could reach the public domain, because they don't want to prejudice the Met Police investigation, and they want to make sure that potentially relatively junior members of the civil service don't get implicated too heavily. There are trade union officials, apparently, reportedly, who are saying, well, if there's some junior member who's staffing a photocopier who went to one party, they shouldn't be suddenly on the front page of every newspaper. And I think that's reasonable.
Absolutely.
And ironically, it's the Labour Party that's demanding that this report go out in full. And potentially that might be that might be hitting slightly too hard at relatively junior members of the civil service. So there's all of those problems that need to be discussed and gone over before this report makes its way to number 10, before then number 10 decides to publish, before then the Prime Minister appears in the Commons. We know that MPs are on what's called Conservative MPs are on what's called a one-line whip today. That means there's no significant business. A three-line whip means they really have to be there for crucial votes.
Yeah.
A one-line whip means they can basically go back to their constituencies. So really, today in Parliament, nothing big happening. Tomorrow, Friday, nothing. It's very rare that something big happens on a Friday in Parliament. And then, of course, the weekend. When we're expecting this to flare up in Parliament? Monday, perhaps.
Well, there we go. Tom, thank you very much for whizzing us through a range of Boris-related issues there, and indeed squeezing the word tittle in to your report, which I thought was expertly done. Right, OK, so let's just give you some other stories, right? Some stories that you might have missed, some ones that we decided to pick up on. So Prime Minister wannabe and former leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, was barred from rejoining the party following a vote on Tuesday.
Yes, he was suspended from Labour in October 2020 as part of an in-house investigation into systemic anti-Semitism. He said the result was disappointing, but that the struggle for peace, justice and sustainability goes on. Those were his words. I mean, I'm just surprised he's still around, to be honest. I completely forgot about him.
Well, yeah. Well, I suppose I think a lot of people possibly did, but
I'd like to forget. I'd like to keep forgetting about the man, quite frankly.
Yeah, so there we go. A rocket from billionaire Elon Musk's space company is hurtling towards the moon after spending 7 years in space. So the SpaceX rocket has been in a chaotic orbit since, I can relate to that, since 2015 and is classified as space junk at this point after going dramatically off course and losing the ability to be controlled. So scientists predict it's going to intercept with the moon at about a velocity of something that I don't understand in a matter of weeks in what will likely be the first unintentional moon landing. I'd love to go to the moon.
Oh, really?
I would love to go to the moon.
I hate flying. I hate flying, you know, just a bog standard aeroplane, let alone going on a
But you don't like flying?
Absolutely not.
Really? Is it the turbulence?
The turbulence, the height. I'm not good with heights whatsoever. The turbulence scares me to death.
Take off the landing.
Yeah.
The plane food.
See, the landing I can deal with because, you know, it's that anticipation of finally getting back to the ground. But takeoff terrifies me.
I don't like your ears popping, you know, when your ears pop and things
I
like
quite
that.
like that.
Well. Do you?
Yeah.
There we go. We're just different people. We're different people.
Very.
But no. Well, look, let's keep your views coming in as well. GB views at gbnews.uk. A lot of them coming in as well, saying about the Holocaust Memorial Day, basically saying we should always remember this. Excuse me. And absolutely, what should never be forgotten is the horrors of the Holocaust and make sure that they are never repeated and the reign of responsibility of the civilised world remains firm. And that's a quote that Andy has sent in. Thank you very much. And some people raising questions about potentially Carrie's involvement in the evacuation of animals out of Afghanistan. It has been mooted before.
Because she's a massive animal rights advocate, of course, yeah.
And I believe, anyway, according to reports, that she previously knew Pen Farthing, this, that and the other, and that potentially she might have lent on Boris a little bit. But, you know, this is a bit of a dead... in my opinion, it kind of should be a bit of a dead story, because this was quite a while ago again now, wasn't it? We had a bit of a controversy about it at the time, and, I just think he's going to get done here for stuff that happened a long time ago.
Yeah, I don't think time should stop him from facing the music if he needs to face it, if things were broken, to be honest. But anyway, we will keep on top of all the twists and turns of that story, and we'll be bringing it to you here on GB News, of course, as we get all the developments. But keep all your thoughts coming in to us, gbviews at gbnews.uk, and we'll be back with more of today's top stories and plenty of your views after the break.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello again. Once the last of the cloud and drizzle clears the south, it's a brighter day for many with some sunshine, but there will be further blustery showers across northern parts of the country, especially northern Scotland. Low pressure is departing into Scandinavia. High pressure is starting to move away from the UK, and this trailing cold front is bringing an area of cloud and some outbreaks of generally light rain and drizzle, mostly for Devon and Cornwall, and for parts of Cornwall that sticks around until the end of the afternoon. But brighter skies follow for the rest of the country with some sunny spells. 1 or 2 showers for northern England, southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, but the bulk of the showers will be across central and northern Scotland, where it will continue to be windy, and those showers will be accompanied by cold air, so the risk of sleet, snow and hail for Shetland and for the hills of northern Scotland. But the showers in most places ease through the evening. 1 or 2 continue for the Northern Isles. Otherwise, it's a dry with clear skies kind of nights, and with winds dropping away. Well, temperatures will also fall, and a frost is expected in many parts. In some sheltered spots, -3 or -4 Celsius for central and southern UK, a touch of frost also for eastern Scotland, northern England. A few fog patches first thing, particularly around southern and southwestern parts of England, East Wales, into East Anglia. They'll continue into mid-morning in some spots, but then they'll lift to brighter skies. But cloud is filtering in from the northwest, and that cloud will bring some spots of drizzle over western hills and coasts, and more persistent rain in the far north and northwest. A milder day to come in the north, but a slightly colder day to come further south. And that cloud becomes more extensive into Friday evening. The winds pick up in the far north once again, and the rain turns heavy, especially for the northwest highlands, where as much as 60 to 80 millimetres is expected by the end of Friday. A windy period then for the weekend, especially in the north with the risk of gales and further rain at times drier further south.
Yes, well, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Muroki on your TV and on your radio. We're here all the way through until midday with all of those massive stories for you to get stuck into.
Yes, and keep getting in touch with your views, GBVs at gbnews.uk. We'll be getting to those very shortly, but first it's time for the latest news.
Good morning, it is 11 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date in the GB News newsroom. Prince Andrew's lawyers have accused Virginia Giuffre of wrongful conduct in their latest attempt to dismiss the civil sex abuse case against him. They've submitted 11 reasons why they believe the case should be thrown out. The Duke of York, who's consistently denied the allegations, also wants to appear before a jury to contest the claims. Well, The Sun's former royal correspondent Charles Ray says the outcome won't change how people view him.
Despite all this posturing by both sides, the plaintiff and the defence, you've got the situation where this case could end up being settled out of court, as 97% of civil actions are settled in America. So none of it is any good. You know, at the end of the day, whatever the result is, it's not going to look well for Prince Andrew, even if he's cleared of all these horrible allegations.
The highly anticipated report into alleged lockdown parties at Downing Street is said to have been delayed by legal checks. Senior civil servant Sue Gray's findings were expected to be published as early as yesterday, but Westminster officials now believe it may not happen until next week. Labour is calling for the report to be published in full, following suggestions by cabinet ministers that sections may be redacted for security reasons. Leeds North East MP Fabian Hamilton told GB News Partygate means the Prime Minister should go.
My constituents, like every other MP's constituents, are sick to the back teeth of this whole Partygate nonsense. They want a resolution, and they want the man that has been at the back of this and the front of this to pack it in, frankly, because if he sets the rules for all of us, and then he breaks them willingly and knowingly, which he clearly has, and then lies to the House of Commons about it, which is against all the rules in the book, then he should resign straight away. I'm sorry.
The Defence Secretary says he's not optimistic a Russian invasion in Ukraine can be stopped. Moscow, which has amassed around 100,000 troops on the border, is now strengthening its military presence, sending more vehicles to the Rostov region for drills. The US has now formally rejected Russia's demand to ban Ukraine from NATO, repeating its commitment to an open-door membership policy. The former NATO Deputy Supreme Allied Commander, General Sir Richard Shiref, told GB News Putin is holding a gun to NATO's head.
Again and again, history tells us that the way to prevent wars is through deterrence and a removal of any hint of miscalculation by being determined, demonstrating a determination to be ready to defend ourselves. This is absolutely being ready to use force, of course, but it's being ready to use force in order to preserve peace. Peace is precious and we need to be ready to defend it.
From Monday in England, there's going to be no limit on the number of visitors that care home residents can receive. The Department of Health also announced changes to COVID testing for care home workers. Weekly PCR tests will be replaced by pre-shift lateral flows from the 16th of February. Plan B measures have now been scrapped in England, bringing a number of coronavirus rules to an end. Face masks are no longer required. Some retailers, though, like Sainsbury's, as well as transport operators, are asking people to continue wearing them. The legal requirement for NHS COVID passes to enter venues like nightclubs has also been dropped. A ceremony to mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day has been held at the Bundestag in Germany. The German Chancellor, the German President and Israel's President laid a wreath at the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe. The ceremony remembers the millions of people who were killed by the Nazi regime. Chief Executive of the Holocaust Educational Trust, Karen Pollock, told GB News it was a defining period in human history.
It may be disturbing for viewers to think about the fact that 6 million individuals, they were taken away from their homes, put in ghettos, some sent into the forests and shot and thrown into a ditch, some deported to concentration camps and death camps, straight to the gas chamber. It is unimaginable. It's very difficult for us to get our heads around.
Job seekers will face sanctions to their benefits if they fail to find a job after 1 month. It's part of the government's plan to get an extra 500,000 people employed by the end of June. Universal credit claimants will now have to look for jobs outside of their chosen field after 4 weeks rather than 3 months. You are up to date now here on GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's return to the point.
Yes, well, good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Muroki. We're on your TV and on your radio, and we're here for another hour, bringing you with some top stories. Here's what's coming up.
Yes, the investigation into Partygate is nearly finished, so as some Tories sharpen their knives, we're going to be asking what is next for Boris Johnson.
And as half of Brits say they're expecting their utility bills to go up a lot in the next 6 months, we'll be discussing what 2022 is set to look like for families and their household bills. Skin time, I imagine.
Yes, and finally, the latest on the Channel migrant crisis, as reports emerged this morning that there are not enough votes at our disposal to stop illegal crossings. We'll be getting into all that very shortly.
OK, and we'll have all of that coming up and much, much more across the programme. You can get in touch with your views, as usual, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, Mercy gives her views on a disabled woman's rights activist being arrested for expressing her views on trans rights.
Now, it's been reported in the Times this morning that a few days ago, police arrested and detained a disabled woman for over 12 hours, raided her home and seized a book. Her crime? Putting up some posters which were supposedly offensive to the trans community. Jennifer Swain, aged 53, who's a women's rights campaigner, was travelling around Newport on her mobility scooter, placing up these posters on lampposts which said things such as "humans never change sex," "respect women's spaces," and "no men in women's prisons." She was then stopped by police, who say they'd received 6 reports of offensive posters, and she was arrested on suspicion of criminal damage and for the offence of intentional harassment, alarm or distress. Her phone was seized, her house was raided, and after more than 12 hours of questioning, she was released on bail at 3:30 in the morning. How pleasant. Now, I find all this staggeringly disproportionate and quite sinister, quite frankly, and a complete affront as well to free expression. Are we really at the stage in this country in 2022 where we arrest and raid people's homes for expressing biological facts and ideological views on identity? Unfortunately, I think the answer is yes, we are. We cannot allow politicians, institutions and authorities to treat women concerned about the impact of trans rights on women's rights as if they're committing one of the 7 deadly sins. If somebody opposes giving transgender women automatic access to women's spaces, whether that be women's sports or women's prisons, that's an opinion. It's simply an ideological viewpoint. It's effectively a political view. If someone thinks trans women should have automatic access to those spaces, that's also an opinion. And whilst I'm very critical of some of the tactics the extreme wings of the transgender lobby use to try to force their views on others, I also accept that in a civil democratic society, people are allowed to express views I vehemently disagree with. This is not about whether I think Swain was right or wrong to do what she did. I personally would not have done that. But following the incident, Swain tweeted this: "My thinking is being investigated, not my actions, my actual thinking." That's what she tweeted, and I think she's right. The police should get on with dealing with actual crimes and stop wasting public time and money trying to police what people think.
Yeah, it's the thought police, isn't it, really? That's the thing. And it's about trying to investigate, what it is that you're thinking. And then essentially maybe criminalising thought, and that's a real problem. I think, and as well, if the question really is about how much offence has been caused, right? That for me is not. It shouldn't be a criminal event. No one has the right to not be offended.
Yeah, absolutely. And the superintendent, Vicky Townsend, who is at this force, she said they received several reports in relation to posters containing offensive material appearing in Newport between October and January. Officers on patrol saw the woman spraying stickers to two lampposts. She was then obviously arrested on suspicion of criminal damage and displaying threatening or abusive writing likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress. However, they do say she was offered medical treatment. She was offered a lift home, which she declined, apparently, and she was released on conditional bail as inquiries continue.
Yes, indeed. I just don't really see... You know, you would have thought this is the kind of thing that the police would deal with when they've solved all the stabbings and they've solved all the murders and women aren't getting sexually assaulted on the streets anymore and all of this stuff. You would have thought that maybe that's when the police might go and speak to a disabled lady about what's going on inside her head. But, you know, alas, we are where we are.
Yes, well, moving on, Prince Andrew is asking for a jury trial to contest the civil sexual assault case against him brought by Virginia Giuffre. He's consistently and strongly denied all the allegations.
Well, joining us now is our GB News Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, thank you very, very much. So what more do we know about the Prince's potential defence, then?
Well, he's going to fight it, that's for sure. I should say we've just had the changing of the guard here at Windsor Castle. Very nice it was too. The Grenadier Guards marching into the castle. They'll be coming back out in 5-10 minutes or so. And there will be much in the way of the ceremonial throughout this Jubilee year. The last thing, of course, that the Queen, that the royal family want is the distraction of a trial involving Prince Andrew in the United States and all of the press attention that that will bring. But we have had a statement of intent now from the Prince and his legal team, and it seems that they are determined to fight the allegations made by Virginia Giuffre, who claims, of course, that she was forced to have sex with Prince Andrew some 2 decades or more ago when she was underage, claims that she was forced to have sex with Prince Andrew at Holiday Island belonging to Jeffrey Epstein, at Jeffrey Epstein's New York apartment and in the home of Ghislaine Maxwell, something that Prince Andrew strenuously denies and is intent, it seems, on fighting in the courts. In legal documents that were handed to the courts in the US yesterday, they call for a trial where they will dispute the claims made by Virginia Giuffre, and they want that trial to be before a jury. Well, they would have got that wish anyway, because as far as I understand it, it was always going to be a jury trial. Now, the issue, of course, with a lot of these civil actions, and this is, remember, a civil case, not a criminal case, in the United States, some 97% of these cases settle long before they get to court. But, as I say, at this stage, the legal team representing Prince Andrew are saying that they are determined to fight it in the courts. Whether that remains the case as we move towards the trial, which is scheduled for September later this year, well, that remains to be seen. But for the moment, at least, they say they want their day in court. They want to be able to fight for the Prince and to refute vehemently those allegations made by Virginia Giuffre.
Yeah, no, of course, we don't want to speculate on everything that he's going to say. We can't speculate on everything he's going to say. But, I mean, I just wonder whether or not Andrew is right in his kind of desire for the jury. I know you said it in your opinion that it was going to happen anyway, but, you know, he thought, didn't he, in the past, that if he did that interview with Emily Maitlis, it would probably all go away, that the vast majority of the British public would watch that and come to their own conclusions, and that the issue would disappear. And he was wrong about that, wasn't he?
Well, he was. I think it's fair to say that he's probably not the most sympathetic figure in terms of how the public warmed to the Prince. He's been seen as being quite arrogant in the way in which he has dealt with this issue, in particular, in the past. And those that know about these matters say that if he was ever to have to testify in a civil case, he would have to be schooled long and hard in trying to come across in a more sympathetic way. As far as he is concerned, though, and in terms of what he has got to gain or to lose, remember, of course, the Queen has deliberately distanced herself and the royal family from the Prince, in part to allow him to mount, it seems, a robust defence, because he no longer has his royal titles and patronages. I'll say that again. Patronages. I can't get that out. I'm going to have to give up on that. But as far as he's concerned, he no longer has them anyway, so that's not important. He now has the ability to go to court, it seems, to fight this. It's still, of course, going to impact on the royal family. Of course it is. It is going to attract a very great deal of public attention. We've got the disclosure phase coming up as well, where a lot of the evidence that the defence and the prosecution in this case, or the complainant, will put forward, and we'll see just how strong that potential case is, and that may well be a determining factor in what we see, whether we see this going to trial at the end of the day, or whether there is an out-of-court settlement, as the vast majority of these civil cases do end up with that out-of-court settlement. But as far as the Prince is concerned, what does he have to lose? Well, of course, he doesn't have that royal connection and his royal titles at the moment. If he wins, he has the ability, of course, to clear his name and perhaps a return to royal life in some form.
Yeah. Well, Mark, thank you. Do you want to give it one more go? Patronages?
Don't bully him.
Go on, one more go.
Patronages.
Patronages. we've all got a word like that, don't we? We've all got a word like that. Mark.
Yeah, no, I've got a few of them actually.
Mark, thank you very much. Fantastic stuff there from Windsor, of course. On the very latest Prince Andrew saga. Well, both senior and backbench Conservative MPs are reportedly planning to submit letters of no confidence in Boris Johnson once Suze Gray's Partygate report is published.
Yes, this comes as the Prime Minister faces fresh claims he lied about intervening to rescue animals from Afghanistan. Well, joining us now is Andrew Bridgen, MP for North West Leicestershire. Good morning, Andrew. Thanks for joining us again. What do you make of the Prime Minister's future?
Well, I think we're going to see the Sue Gray report out on Monday. It's quite interesting that the Labour Party obviously thought it was going to come out today, so they put all their MPs on a three-line whip. I'm afraid they're going to be disappointed. I don't think it's going to come out tomorrow, so I think it's going to be Monday. Clearly, Sue Gray's report is damning because it's the conclusions of her report, which then she referred matters to the Met for police investigation, and it's crossed the threshold with sufficient evidence of sufficient severity that they're now apparently putting a £1 million police budget into investigating these matters. This is tremendously damaging for Boris Johnson. And whatever he says about whether he was present at the parties or not, he's the head of the organisation and he sets the culture. And I think the buck stops with him. I wish now that he'd listened to the advice I gave him a couple of weeks ago. If he'd considered his position, then we wouldn't be in this position now. And I think there'll be no end to the continual drip of revelations, especially, Mercy, if he sacks a load of his inner circle in number 10. He just created another potential network of leakers.
Do you think, Andrew, that just hearing that about the £1 million budget apparently for this investigation, do you think the British public could be that happy about that? You know, it's a lot of money, that, isn't it, at a time when there's a cost of living crisis and an energy crisis, etc. And, you know, actually, not being funny, but, you know, the Met Police are constantly going on about being under-resourced and needing more officers. There are serious crimes taking place. £1 million quid's a lot of money.
It's a huge amount of money. But, I mean, I think we do need to have a thorough investigation. But also this could drag on for months. There's no saying that the police investigation won't uncover other issues which they believe, or avenues of inquiry which they need to investigate. It rumbles on. It's undermining the Prime Minister's position and his ability to function, and the government's ability to function. and it's ultimately very bad news for the country, our democracy, and not least the Conservative Party.
Relatively well at Prime Minister's questions yesterday. There was quite a lot of back and forth, wasn't there? A couple of cheeky little jibes about Blackford's weight, which I personally really enjoyed. And also as well, it's Keir Starmer him saying, he needs to up his game. He needs to up his game. Boris is coming out swinging, isn't he?
No one said he's not a performer, but ultimately, this whole issue for me is about the evidence we've seen that those in number 10, the circle around Boris Johnson, who've set the rules for everyone else during the lockdowns, have been able to do pretty much what they wanted, and it appears that the rest of us have to do as we're told. That's completely unacceptable. And the crux of the matter is, this isn't really about some cake and a few parties. Ultimately, this is about whether we can believe what the Prime Minister tells us at the dispatch box or elsewhere, and that is hugely significant, Patrick.
Yeah.
Lots of our viewers and listeners have been getting in touch as we've been discussing this week and saying, there's so many problems to deal with at the moment, and lots of them are sick of hearing about Partygate. Yeah. They want the Prime Minister and the government to get on with dealing with all the issues we face as a country. If Boris survives this, what do you think should be his priority in terms of those big policy questions now facing the country?
Well, what we saw is that we've, because we had a lighter lockdown than elsewhere in the world, we've underspent our budget deficit. We're not borrowing as much money last month as we expected to do so, by quite a considerable amount of money. If we go for growth now, we get out of the COVID restrictions, I think we will have enough of a head start on our competitor economies that we can cancel the national insurance increases for April. We can help with VAT on heating, fuel, and I'd like also to see a freeze on council tax this year as well to help out with the cost of living. But that doesn't detract from the fact, what I think will probably happen is it may well be that there'll be 54 letters in next week and the Prime Minister will probably survive the confidence motion. But I think he'll make so many enemies from number 10 in his cull of those who are around him that these damaging leaks will keep coming out.
Okay.
I honestly think we'll do very badly at the moment in the local elections in May. And then I think the 1922 committee will change the rules on confidence motions to 6 months.
Wow.
And I think ultimately the Prime Minister will be gone in the summer.
Wow, well, hey, it's a bold series of predictions. You have rattled off there a couple of things, the fact that we could go to growth, we could have a head start maybe on some of our competitor economies. Vaccine rollout, of course, has been a part of that. And these are all things that Boris Johnson has done, all right, whilst some of it he might have been rather infused with cheese and wine. But he was also doing all of this stuff as well. And is there a question mark over whether or not you should be careful what you wish for here? There's no saying that the person that replaces Boris, if indeed he does get replaced, is going to be any more popular at the ballot box.
No, but this is about public life. It's about whether we can trust the word of the Prime Minister at the dispatch box. And clearly that's in question, Patrick, and that cuts to the heart of our democracy. I think there does have to be surely some rules in how you conduct yourself in public life. Perhaps if that's what the public want, you can have no rules in public life. I'm not sure that's what my constituents in North West Leicestershire are willing to vote for. And I think once you've lost the trust that that bond of leadership, that those who are leading don't ask the public to suffer any privations or sacrifices they're not willing to suffer themselves. Once you've broken that trust, I think it's going to really struggle to come back, Patrick.
I can completely understand that, and I can completely understand, of course, that there's maybe a bigger issue here, as it were. That question, as you've alluded to there, of morality, of trust, really, frankly, and I get that. And if that's been shot, then that's been shot. But I do wonder, and unfortunately we'll have to pick this up next time you're on, Andrew, because I'm getting shouted at. But I do wonder whether or not a lot of these Red Wall MPs might end up with someone like a Rishi Sunak, who frankly, people of Bolsover, I wouldn't.
Or
have thought would be...
might not win their seat at all.
Might not go out and vote for. But anyway, look, hey, all these unanswerable questions for now. Andrew, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show, Andrew. Andrew Bridgen, the Conservative MP for North West Leicestershire.
Yes, well, after the break, we'll be discussing the increasing cost of living as utility bills rise, while wages sadly stagnate. But before that, the weather.
Hello again. Once the last of the cloud and drizzle clears the south, it's a brighter day for many with some sunshine, but there will be further blustery showers across northern parts of the country, especially northern Scotland. Low pressure is departing into Scandinavia. High pressure is starting to move away from the UK, and this trailing cold front is bringing an area of cloud and some outbreaks of generally light rain and drizzle, mostly for Devon and Cornwall, and for parts of Cornwall that sticks around until the end of the afternoon. But brighter skies follow for the rest of the country with some sunny spells. 1 or 2 showers for northern England, southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, but the bulk of the showers will be across central and northern Scotland, where it will continue to be windy, and those showers will be accompanied by cold air, so the risk of sleet, snow and hail for Shetland and for the hills of northern Scotland. But the showers in most places ease through the evening. 1 or 2 continue for the Northern Isles. Otherwise, it's a dry with clear skies kind of nights, and with winds dropping away. Well, temperatures will also fall, and a frost is expected in many parts. In some sheltered spots, -3 or -4 Celsius for central and southern UK, a touch of frost also for eastern Scotland, northern England. A few fog patches first thing, particularly around southern and southwestern parts of England, East Wales, into East Anglia. They'll continue into mid-morning in some spots, but then they'll lift to brighter skies. But cloud is filtering in from the northwest, and that cloud will bring some spots of drizzle over western hills and coasts, and more persistent rain in the far north and northwest. A milder day to come in the north, but a slightly colder day to come further south. And that cloud becomes more extensive into Friday evening. The winds pick up in the far north once again, and the rain turns heavy, especially for the northwest highlands, where as much as 60 to 80 millimetres is expected by the end of Friday. A windy period then for the weekend, especially in the north, with the risk of gales and further rain, at times drier further south.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Morning, everyone. It's 11, well, just come up to 11:30 actually now. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys and Mercy Muroki on GB News. We're live, as ever, on your TV and your radio.
Yes, now a cost of living crisis could be brewing in homes up and down the country, with more than 3/4 of Brits saying they're expecting utility bills to increase by a lot this year. A new survey of more than 2,000 people highlights a growing anxiety amongst the population about rising prices.
Indeed. Well, our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, joins us live from Derby. Will, thank you very much. So what's going on where you are then?
Good morning. Yes, we've been hearing a lot about it in the news recently, this cost of living crisis, prices going up, and this survey that you referred to into the intro, an Ipso Mori survey of around 2,000 people, highlights some of the worries that people have. It's around 3/4 of people, 75%, that reckon their utility bills are going to go up. There's also a lot of worry about shopping costs, as well as how people might be able to spend their money on social time. And while for things like utilities, at least until April, some people that are on fixed-term tariffs will be able to plan their payments a little bit more easily, there are a lot of people that are certainly worried. And yesterday I had a chance to speak to a few of the people on the streets of Derby and hear some of their concerns.
Well, I haven't really noticed much as yet, because I pay everything monthly, so it's still the same price as the month before. So really, I've not really noticed anything.
Well, where cost of living is concerned, obviously the petrol's sort of gone up probably 50% from what it was before, so you obviously keep your eye on stuff like that more than what perhaps you did a few years ago. Where energy and food's concerned, you tend to sort of be a bit more looking at prices perhaps than what you did beforehand. Because obviously these things do catch up at the end of the month, you know, when you actually work out what you've actually spent. And you sometimes think, oh, blimey, I didn't realise I spent that much. So
all your food's going up, isn't it?
Yeah, that's electric's really bad, really bad. Mate, we're struggling with that at the minute, aren't we?
Yeah. Putting a hell of a lot on it, aren't we?
Yeah, look, it's something like £120 a month it's gone up to. It's ridiculous. I don't know how they expect people to survive.
Petrol's going like massively in price. Like last year it was like 99p a litre, and now it's like nearly £1.50. It's just ridiculous. I feel like petrol's just not lasting as longer either. I feel like I'm like putting petrol in every like week. It's a nightmare.
Well, I've just moved to uni in Derby, and I've got £5,000 per year. It's the first time I've started having to do my own food shop, and I'm realising that it's not really enough to cover it. So I've got a job on the side, but I'm still just about scraping along, to be honest.
Well, cheers, Will. Thank you very much for bringing us that. Great to actually hear the views of real people, as it were, because that's who it's all about at the end of the day. Will Hollis there. Thank you very, very much. Right, well, after the break, to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day, we will be speaking with Ivor Pearl, who is a Holocaust survivor. But first, here's a look at this morning's news.
Good morning, it's 11:33. I'm Rosie Wright, here to get you up to date on GB News. Prince Andrew's lawyers have accused Virginia Giuffre of wrongful conduct in their latest attempt to dismiss the civil sex abuse case against him. They've submitted 11 reasons why they believe the case should be thrown out. The Duke of York, who's consistently denied the allegations, also wants to appear before a jury to contest the claims. The highly anticipated report into alleged lockdown parties at Downing Street is said to have been delayed by final legal checks. Senior civil servant Sue Gray's findings were expected to be published as early as yesterday, but Westminster officials now believe it may not happen until next week. The Defence Secretary says he's not optimistic a Russian invasion in Ukraine can be stopped. Moscow's amassed around 100,000 troops on the border with Ukraine, and they're strengthening their military presence, sending more vehicles now to the Rostov region for drills. The US has formally rejected Russia's demand to ban Ukraine from NATO. From Monday, there's going to be no limit on the number of visitors to care homes in England. The Department of Health also announced changes to COVID testing for workers. Weekly PCR tests for care home staff will be replaced by pre-shift lateral flows instead from the 16th of February. Plan B measures have been scrapped in England, bringing a number of coronavirus rules to an end. Face masks are no longer required, but some retailers like Sainsbury's, as well as transport operators, are asking people to continue wearing them. The legal requirement for NHS COVID passes to enter venues like nightclubs has also been dropped. Rising energy and food prices contributed to an estimated 2.5 million UK households missing bill payments this month. A survey by consumer group Which found people struggle to pay at least one mortgage, rent loan or credit card account. You are up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. A short break now and then we'll be back to the point.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Yes, morning everybody. It's 11:37. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys and Mercy Muroki. And of course, we're on your TV and radio this morning, so there's no excuse for not taking us with us everywhere you go.
Yes, well, today we commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day to remember, honour and share the stories of the lives of millions of Jews and others persecuted by the Nazi regime. An estimated total of 6 million men, women and children were kidnapped, tortured and murdered between 1941 and 1945.
Well, joining us now, and we're very lucky to be able to do this actually, is a Holocaust survivor, Ivor Pearl, who was just 12 years old when he was taken to Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland. Thank you very, very much for joining us this morning. Can you tell me a little bit about when you were about 12 years old, or say, the couple of years before you were actually taken to Auschwitz, and what that was like for you?
Well, actually, the tragedy of the Hungarian Jewry is a double fold. Number one, this happened to us all together, but also Hungary was part of the Axis power of Germany. So Hungary fought with Germany during the war until they realized that the war was coming to an end, and they tried to make peace overtures with the Allies. And of course, the Germans found out about it and occupied Hungary. I mean, they say occupied, they were there all the time, but overthrew the Hungarian government. And literally, within 3 months, no exaggeration, within 3 months, about 600,000 Jews were most of them put to their death. And I remember, as a young child, the peasants were demonstrating outside the town hall because the Hungarians were fighting on the Russian front. Those people that know the Second World War, they were being massacred there. And the peasant kept on shouting, why don't you bring our loved ones home from the Russian front? And they said, we can't bring them home. We can't afford the infrastructure to bring the wounded soldiers from Russia back to Hungary. Now, as a child, I thought to myself, if they can't bring back the infrastructure to bring the soldiers back, how can they take 400 or 500,000 people to their death? They're thinking about their own mind. How can somebody hate somebody more than love the others? How could they say that they'd rather take the Jews to their death than bring the loved ones home from the German front?
Yeah.
And what do you remember feeling at the time? I mean, obviously nobody could have predicted this event. It was so unprecedented in history. But what thoughts were going through your head and your family at that time?
I think it's a very, very important question because I was 12 years old. Now, what could a 12 years old in Hungary and East Europe think, especially during the war? I could only see and hear what was happening. I couldn't take part in any event at all. But I do remember in 1943, late 43, beginning of 44, there were 3 Jews turned up at the synagogue, and they were from Poland. And they kept on telling us, you know, brethren, take heed. We're being absolutely herded into gas chambers, being burned alive, being buried alive into the camps itself. Do something about it. And you know what? I remember what we told them. We said, come on. You know, the more horrible story you tell us, the bigger the charities will give you. But this is Austro-Hungary. This is not Poland. These things don't happen here.
No.
And looking back, I thought to myself, how the Germans fooled us all.
Yeah. What was your experience then when you got to Auschwitz? You were on your way. Just talk me through what that was like for you, what you saw, and your memories of that.
Well, the whole story was very, very slow. People say, how could you allow that to happen to you? I said, first of all, they lived in a very, very anti-Semitic country. So harassment of the Jews was nothing unusual. So they said, first we said, you know, you mustn't go out in the evening, curfew. Well, we'll manage that. And then you mustn't fraternize with non-Jews. We could manage that. Gradually, the noose was getting tighter and tighter and tighter, until one day we woke up and everything was just too late to do anything about. But everything was done very, very, very scientifically. And that is why also I have part of the problem, because we keep on saying, what is the answer? The answer is education. Education. I said, it's quite right. But who was the most educated country in the 1930s? Germany. So what did they do with the education? So all the knowledge that you had was helped to increase the death rate more. So I'm not saying education is not the answer, but education on its own has to be.
Yeah, no, I hope this is okay with you, really. I've been told that you were there with your mum, is that right? Did you arrive with your mum to Auschwitz?
Yes, well, we're taken into ghettos, eventually from a smaller ghetto to a bigger ghetto, and from a bigger ghetto we're herded onto cattle trucks and eventually taken to Auschwitz, which we didn't know where we were taken to. We were told we were going to another country, giving us farmland, and we should be safer than we are where we are. But of course, we attached ourselves to any good news as possible. And before we knew what happens, we were on the train, a cattle truck, for 4 or 5 days. I'm not quite sure how many, but the people should know by now what it meant having a journey from the ghetto to Auschwitz. Once we arrived in Auschwitz, we heard people who were working through the sleds from the cattle truck. You could see people working on the railway line, and they kept on shouting in Yiddish, which was akin to German, that the children must say that if asked what question at any age, they must say they're at least 16 years of age. And the other thing is that do not save any food. Eat up all the food, because obviously anywhere you were taken, you were never told how long you were going to be away. So try to last the food out as much as possible. And they said, don't save any food. And the children, I asked her how old. They said, you're 16. But of course, we arrived at a place we didn't know where. The doors opened up. It didn't open up very quickly because of banging away, because an awful lot of ill, sick, and dead people on board as well already. And as we sort of dumped out of onto the track, there was men and children, men and boys one side, women and children another side. And once we started marching, I started running over to my mother. And Mum said, what are you doing here, darling? He said, no, go back to your brother. I said, no, please let me come with you. No, I want to come with you. Of course, the luxury of arguing in those conditions were just non-existent. Of course, I went back to my brother. But whether she knew or not, that was the last time we saw each other, I don't know. All I know is that I never saw my parents again after this.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I just wonder if you can tell us what gave you hope to keep you going through all those difficulties that you faced that are completely unimaginable to us.
You know, that's a wonderful question. I keep asking myself as well, and I don't know. All I can say is I think I was young. I remember saying, I haven't lived life. I wanted to see life. By instinct, purely by instinct. It could have been any reason. And in fact, when I think about our survival, I think you had to have luck to survive. But not everybody that had luck survived. You had to have something else. And what that something else, in fact, I remember two scientists discussing that subject, what that was, X factor, they said they don't know. So obviously I had that X factor, but I'm not quite sure what it was. Obviously, I wanted to taste life, not having lived at all.
Yes, indeed. What can you remember of your liberation? How that must have felt? And if you don't mind me asking, as well, how do you feel about the people who did this? Because it wasn't just camp guards, etc. It wasn't just Adolf Hitler, was it? There were, I mean, millions of people who were complicit in this kind of behaviour.
Do you know, Patrick, it's a most wonderful question, because when I give talks to the children and schools or whoever wants to hear the lesson, the question always comes up: do you hate Germany? Do you hate the Germans? And I thought to myself, you know, I said, why do you say, do I hate the Germans? I mean, who were my party was herding me into the ghettos, into the gas chamber and working? They were Hungarians, Romanians, Estonians, French. I mean, Germany only gave the green light to do what we wanted to do, but the perpetrators are not Germans. So I think to myself, well, you know what I mean? I've got to go through my life hating everybody. I can't do that. I think what I keep trying to tell humanity, or if anybody wants to listen, is what can happen if you allow yourself to sink to that level. And not, if I may make one suggestion, if one really wants to know about the Holocaust and about anti-Semitism, that every time Jews have suffered, other people have suffered as well. But the Jews keep coming back. And in fact, they're coming back stronger. Thank God for that. But every time Jews suffered, other people suffered as well.
Yeah.
And what do you hope the legacy, as we move on in time, as the Holocaust itself, you know, becomes almost a distant memory to people of younger generations, what do you hope that the legacy will be, especially for the people of me and Patrick's generation and generations after us?
Yeah.
Well, funny enough, that is a question I would like to ask you. Knowing that all of us are going around, or people are going around telling about the Holocaust and the tragedies, and you know, people don't listen to what happens. Have you seen any improvement in the hatred in humanity?
Well, actually, you only have to look. You only have to look, don't you, to last night in Stamford Hill, where there's two relatively elderly Orthodox Jewish men who were
Well, exactly.
Attacks, and not just in relation to Jews. I mean, you know, you look at what's going on in vast swathes of the Middle East and Africa, you know.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I think that it's I keep on saying that if and when I go up or down, I don't know where I'll go when I leave the world, I'll ask the maker, you know, there's something very, very wrong in your method with what's happening down below. But I must say that I hope, and I do feel as I'd like to see some improvement about hatred in general, not necessarily anti-Semitism. Because, I mean, you know, when I go around to children, asking them, when did the Holocaust start? And if I was to ask 90% of the people, they say about 35, 32, 39. I said, you're absolutely out by hundreds and hundreds of years. The Holocaust started by the anti-Semitism having being part of certain parties' life, other than somebody came along here and said, right now, you know, you had anti-Semitism all your life. Now here's a green button. Do what you want to do.
No, indeed. There are so many questions that I want to ask you, really. One of them, again, I've just had this in my notes, really, is that you came face to face with Dr. Mengele, I believe, who's, I think, known as Dr. Death, if that's right. Is that correct?
Well, that's what I said before about the people talking about telling me your age is older than you are, eat all the food. Well, we started marching along, and you could see someone in front of you. Couldn't see the smart uniform with a white glove, pointing left and right. So they say he was Dr. Mengele. I don't know how Dr. Mengele looks like or what he does look like, but it doesn't matter. I don't think it matters at all. But they say it was Dr. Mengele. And I came in front of him, and he asked me, how old are you? Did I say that before? I said, I was 16. Oh. Every second. I can still see his face practically every night. He must have thought to himself, you know, kid, if you're telling me lies, it won't last long anyway. So, all right, he put me point to the right.
Goodness.
Which meant you're living. Point to the left for the men's gas chamber.
Wow. I mean, it's just
astonishing. But I gave talk to the Chelsea for the young football team before they go to Auschwitz. I said to him, it's hard to describe to you that what we were given numbers. Why were we given numbers? Because we're not human beings. Now, I kid you not, if you see a fly or something on a table and you smack it and you kill it, and it's exactly how we were thought of as well.
I mean, look, goodness gracious me. Well, look, thank you so much for your time, for that insight. I mean, I could talk to you all day about it, and you know, thank you so much for making the time for us. Really, as Ivor Pearl there, of course, survived the Holocaust, and goodness gracious me, I'm actually lost for words.
Yeah, I mean, you have so many. There's so many questions, and at the same time, you almost don't know what to say because it's so poignant, so moving, and it's an incredible. You have to hear people's stories like that. It really
it makes it
home.
real, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
It real.
It really does.
Anyway, well, look. Well, goodness me. Well, look, what do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And indeed, yes, a lot of you have been saying, wow, absolutely, it's brought people to tears at home. That's,
I think it was incredibly... He just said that he still sees his face every night when he sleeps. It just, goes to show how those people's strength, to me, is unimaginable. Just the bravery of those people is incredible. I can't even put it into words. Yes, here you go. This is from Gary. I grew up thinking that what the Nazis did to the Jews was simply because one side believed in something that others didn't. But I went to the Holocaust exhibition at the Imperial War Museum in London and spent hours there looking at every display, reading everything, and I learned it went a lot further than just our beliefs. And I think that's something that Ivor alluded to there, really, which was
asking him there essentially how he felt about the people that did this. And he said, it wasn't just the Germans, it wasn't just people like that, it wasn't just necessarily Nazis as well. He believes the Holocaust started really when anti-Semitism started. It went all the way, it's probably gone back
Absolutely,
since
it's that gradual, that insidious nature of it, isn't it? And I think it's a good warning, I suppose, for it to never happen again, because it does really always start off in a very subtle way, I suppose,
Absolutely.
and that's how it escalates eventually into things like that.
Yes, indeed. All right, OK, well, look, we'll move away from that and finish, I think, with a little bit of the kind of politics of the day, as it were. Andrew Bridgen, the Conservative MP Andrew Bridgen, was on, of course, and he was talking about the fact that he thinks that there's every chance that Boris Johnson will be gone. Well,
by summer, he said.
By
didn't
summer,
it? Yeah.
and he said that even the 1922 committee, in his opinion, might change the rules so that when you have a no confidence vote, actually you have to wait 6 months, not the year, as they do at the moment.
We have Bernie here saying, I had always voted Labour, but when Jeremy Corbyn was leader, I decided to vote Conservatives. I think Boris has done an awful lot of good for this country. I can't be the only person to stick up for him. So
you're certainly not the only person.
Conservative there.
Certainly not the only person. There are a lot of people in our inbox who will stick up for him. I suppose the question is whether his own MPs want to stick up for him and whether or not they want to continue to back him as well. We'll obviously have to wait and see how that pans out. We think Monday, don't we? The Sue Gray report could drop, so we'll be keeping you abreast of all of that. But look, thank you very much. That's it from us here today.
Yes, it is.
To the point. But don't go away, because up next, of course, we've got the briefing with the wonderful Gloria De Piero. So don't go anywhere.